Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here at Star Cottage Studio, and hopefully, you all have been having a good week so far. Yes, busy. I had a meeting and it kind of ran late, and then I had to run over to the cottage. We still don't have internet at the house, so that's providing some challenges. Hopefully, we'll get that kind of sorted out this week. Um, but with the holiday coming up this weekend, it makes it a little bit tricky. So it's my workflow has been a little bit wonkadoodle. But you kind of have to roll with it. If you're watching, I'd love it if you said hello and maybe where you're tuning in from. It's always nice to see where people are watching. Yeah, so we've been super busy. I'm working on some projects for the Metal Museum, which I'm getting ready to go to for the opening. The opening is on June 4th, and the show is called We Are Here, and I'm in it. One of my little portrait brooches, isn't it? So if you're in the Memphis area and want to hang out, definitely stop by and say hello because that's always fun. I see a couple of people are watching. Teresa's watching. Hi, Teresa. Norma's watching. Hi, Norma. Yeah, so I also wanted to say, I'm not going to dwell on it, but I also wanted to say sorry about yesterday's tutorial. It did not pan out. In my mind, I thought I remembered how to do it, but I haven't made that. And I was like, when? And it's probably been at least 12 years since I've done that. So I forgot how to do it. And I thought I remembered how to do it, but, and that it would all come back to me with the slamming of the door. No. So it didn't work out. But I did show how to make a beaded bead with the pinch bead. So I don't feel like it was a complete loss. And then after the video, I spent time taking everything apart and trying to redo it, and I just couldn't remember how to do it. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to practice and figure things out again, try to refresh myself and find my notes and see if I can actually do it and be able to communicate it so that it's not a terrible experience. It wasn't so bad yesterday, but you know what it's like when you, and maybe you don't know, like when you go into something and you think you know the answer and then you don't know the answer and then stuff starts going wrong and then you're like, so anyways, so I see a couple more people have tuned in. Lorraine is watching. Hello, Lorraine. Norma says yesterday was fine. It's good to see how things work or don't work for artists as well. And the pivot was fine. Yeah, I just, I'm not one of those people who is like hyper fixated on being perfect, especially because my work is not necessarily like flawless. I recently took a workshop with somebody who um, they messed up and they had to correct their demo and they were so upset about it. And I was like, there's nothing to be upset about. It's actually good to see how you fix that. My problem is that I could never bring it fully around to the point where I could show you how to salvage that. But it is what it is. I'm going to move past it. I thought about deleting it, but like Norma said, I think it's good to show that we're not infallible. We are, we're human beings, and it's sometimes, I think it's easy to forget that. Maybe. I don't know. All right. So today I'm going to do, I call it a dot and dash necklace or chain. It's not a really a dot and dash. If you know what a dot and dash is, it's a little bit different. But that's what I call this. And I actually know how to do this one, so don't get nervous, anybody. All right. So hopefully you all are doing well. William and Jen, they filmed last night for the Saturday tutorials. So there's 2 new ones that are going to come up that they filmed. Knock on wood. And so they did that last night. And then I'm working on the stuff for the Metal Museum. And oh boy, I was supposed to go and meet somebody in Pittsburgh at Phipps, but that ended up not happening, which makes me a little bit sad because I always like to spend time at Phipps, but that's all right. And then tomorrow I have a meeting, but I can't remember what it is, so I'll have to refresh before. And then this weekend I'm going to New Jersey to pick up a vent hood for the kiln. So if you don't know, we won a Surf Plus Get Ready grant to increase ventilation in the studio. And so I'm trying to do everything as economically as possible because the grant was only for $500. And if I bought everything brand spanking new and hired people, it would be thousands and thousands. But I think that if I get everything, I found a couple things on Facebook Marketplace and a couple of other things, resources. And I think I can get everything done for not under the grant, but just slightly over. So knock on wood, that works out. The other thing I wanted to remind folks, if they didn't get a chance to see, if you go to my personal timeline or if you go to my Instagram, that's Andrew Thornton Artist Instagram. Don't go to my personal Instagram because that's only flowers and cats. But if you go to Andrew Thornton Artist, all one word, you can see the necklace that I made for Crafting the Future. We're doing a raffle on this necklace. It features one of my enameled pendants that I made during the Tanya Crane workshop at Touchstone Center for Crafts. And I paired it with some beautiful black opals. So I don't think the picture does it justice because there's those flashes of light that you just don't get. You just don't see in a still picture like that. So maybe I'll do like a reel or something so that people can see it. But anyways, there's instructions on how to either Venmo me or you can PayPal me to buy raffle tickets. They're $5 each or 5 for $20. So if you pay for what would be 4, you'll get a free one. And I'm going to do that drawing probably on Sunday because I'll be driving on Saturday. So anyways, hopefully people will get a raffle ticket. Even if you just get one, it all adds up and it supports a really great cause. Crafting the Future is a really wonderful organization that helps promote BIPOC artists and providing accessibility and inclusivity and diversity in the craft industry. It's super, super important. We see so often people being marginalized, and that's not awesome. So this is a really great organization, and I like the message, and there's cool people who are participating in this. If you look up on Instagram, the hashtag CTFDIY, all the different ones are come up of the people who are doing raffles right now or sweepstakes. And yeah, so check those out and bid. Hopefully you don't bid on the ones that I bid on. Actually, all the money goes to a good cause. So Um, Somebody tried to call me in the middle of the live, and so we went. I don't know if you went dead on your end for a second, but anyways, I see a couple more folks have tuned in. Michelle's watching. Hi, Michelle. Michelle said that she just finished her project. Good. Norma says that she saw my post on Facebook. Oh, good. Yeah, I really would like to make a sizable donation. So far, not too many people have participated, so it kind of makes me like a little bit nervous that I'm only going to be like, here's your. I mean, it all adds up and it all helps, but I know that the pendant alone is worth $75, and the bead strand by itself is worth $60. So even if you get it and you take it apart and use it in your own stuff, it's well worth it. You could be a winner. I'm going to try to do the drawing live so you can see it. So you'll have to stay tuned on my Instagram for details on that. Michelle says, just posted the earrings. Oh, good. And then now she has to figure out the price for everything. That's always tricksy. Bonnie's watching. Hey, Bonnie. It is a good cause. It's a really good cause. Michelle says, my husband really likes your necklace. Oh, thanks. Well, hopefully, folks participate in the auction. It would be really, really nice if it was a very successful one and we raised a lot of money for them. I haven't gotten a scholarship through them, but it does certainly help. So anyway, so yeah, so today's Wednesday, and we're gonna do a wire project, and I'm gonna show maybe two variations of this, but I'm only gonna promise one. All right. Norma says, Andrew, just haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm making a ticket purchase. Oh, good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a really good cause. Speaking of really good causes, Touchstone just launched their YouTube channel. So if you haven't gone over to Touchstone Center for Crafts YouTube and subscribe, please do so. That would be super awesome. You should subscribe to us too, Allegory Gallery, if you haven't already. But I don't know. I'm just trying to be the rising tide that raises all boats, y'all. All right, so I'm just gonna flip things around and we'll get to it, right? Because otherwise we'll be here. I have so much stuff to do. I'm like, oh, let's have a leisurely conversation. But I have so much stuff to do. I got homework, y'all. So instead, let's just flip this around. You're gonna see the ceiling for a second, and then I'll flip the camera. All right. All right. So one of the things you may notice is that I have a board here. This is a wooden board. It's a much loved, much abused, wooden board, and I use it all the time. I actually have hammered stuff on this to the point where it split a couple different times, and I lovingly combine them by stapling the board together. Hopefully it won't fall apart anymore. So what we'll need for this project today is some bronze wire. This is 14 gauge bronze wire. It's it's on the heavier gauge. So if you don't have a lot of mobility, you can do this with thinner gauge wire. However, the thinner you go, the more likely that you're going to run into problems. And what I mean by run into problems is if it's too thin, what's going to happen is it's going to want to bend and warp. And then the other problem is that it can come undone. So because there's the length is a little bit longer on these links, the dash part, it can cause problems. All right. So if you use a thicker gauge wire like this, it's super good. I would recommend using a rigid wire that is not a craft wire. So if you're going to use like aluminum or something like that, or a coated aluminum, you may want to use a copper, silver, bronze, something that you can work hard in and it's not going to come apart. Crop wires are great, but sometimes they're a little bit soft and malleable, which is a really wonderful quality. However, in this particular design, um, if you don't have the ability to work hard in your piece, it can become real problematic. Now, so I've got this. This is 14 gauge bronze wire. But he said, where can I buy that? I got this from Rio. It's called Jeweler's Bronze. I don't think we sell it at the store right now. If you can't find it, let me know by emailing us at info@allegorygallery.com and we can hook you up. Otherwise, there's places like McMaster Car and Monster Slayer. There's a bunch of different places that you can go to get wire. All right. So one thing I'm going to say is don't work your wire too much to begin with, because we don't want to work hard on it prematurely because it can cause issues. But also, if it's kinked up and there's a slight bend in them, then we're going to have issues as well. So for the beads in our project, we're going to be using these vintage Chinese ceramic beads. I like these beads because they have relatively large holes in them. They fit over the wire, so it's not going to be a loosey goo like a thing where I have to test each bead to make sure. The other thing that I think is cool is these have a little bit of gilding. So if you look at them close, there's a little bit of gold on them. So I think that goes well with the wire. It picks that up. All right. So we're going to get our ruler out. And I'm going to measure approximately 3 inches of this wire. Now, if you want, you can mark it. I'm not going to mark it. I'm going to precisely eyeball it. And then I have this really cool thing. It's from Xuron. It's called a double flush cutter. And you just take this and you put it in there and you get a flush end on here. So normally what happens when there's like a regular cutter, with a regular cutter, let me show you what happens. So most of the time, a cutter like this, even though this is a flush cutter, the blades, when they meet, are shaped like this. And so when you put the wire in like this and it cuts, it's flat on this side, but this side gets where it gets like a little taper. And so either then you have to go and flip that taper around and chop that off with the flush sides of the flush cutter, or you file this down, or you sand it down, or whatever. But because this has that double shearing action that I was talking about yesterday or whenever, the day before, it it makes it so that both ends are flat. So that's a super duper time saver. Now, if you want, you can use your piece as a template, and you can use that to measure out your pieces so you don't have to measure every time. One thing I will recommend if you do this technique is have your one and have that be the master one. And what I mean by that is even after you cut your pieces, there probably are minute differences, especially if you're kind of eyeballing it like the way that I do it. And so if you cut this and you use this as a template and you use that template to cut that and you put this one aside and then you use this piece and eventually you're going to go by your 20th one, they're all going to get a little bit longer, 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 longer. And then you're going to take this piece and you're going to hold it up to the first piece, and one's going to be super short and one's going to be super long. So always use the same ones as your template, and that will help you dramatically when it comes to making this work. All right. So this wire is dead soft, but it is a thicker wire. So I will recommend that if you have any mobility issues with your hands, this is not necessarily going to be the easiest project. It's not going to be super difficult, but just keep that in mind. All right. So measure that. And I'm going to put this aside. Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Harry. I see lots of folks tuning in. All right. And then when you do this, you can kind of see there's a little gap where those meet up. And then you kind of eyeball it where that meets up. And then you can cut it. And in theory, you'll get your line. All right. I'm just going to show a little bit. I'm not going to make the full-on thing necklace. I used to do these, and they're super easy. They look like a lot of work, but they're not a lot of work. All right, so just use this as your template and mark it, and I'm going to show you 3 of them. And then if you want to keep going, you can keep going. If you don't want to keep going, then you don't have to. But this is just a fun chain option. All right. So for today's project, we're also going to need round nose pliers, a rosary pliers, chain nose pliers. If you want to be super fancy, you can bust out the files in the sandpaper. I'm not going to do that, but if you want to do that, you are more than welcome to. And yeah, so, and we'll also need a rawhide mallet or a nylon hammer. You don't want to get something that's harder. There are things like Delrin and things like that, and that'll mar up. I mean, it won't mar it up as much as steel, but you'll want a softer hammer like this. And you also want a wooden thing that you can hammer. Now, do not use your table because you're going to ding up your table. Because somebody was like, I have a wooden table. I'm just going to use my table. And then it's like, well, I guess you don't like your table because it's going to really ding up your table. All right. So depending on where you make your loop on your round nose pliers will determine how big your hole is in your loop end. So if you want a small loop, you'll go towards the tip. Bonnie says, would a black rubber mallet work? Maybe. You have to try it. I don't know. It might be too hard, but you'll just have to see. And if you get a rawhide mallet, this is another thing. If you get a rawhide mallet and you buy a brand new one, make sure to scuff up the ends So what ends up happening with rawhide mallets is they have the leather and they put glue and then they roll it up super tight and then they compress it. And when they compress it, the glue squeezes out on the side. And so you have a layer of that glue on the face of your mallets. And when you have that on the face of your hammer or your mallet, it can be really super hard. So somebody once they're like, "Oh, I got a rawhide mallet, but it still marks up my metal." And what I realized is that they did not condition the surface of their mallet. So an easy thing to do is to take it on a grinder and grind off all the glue. And or if you don't have that, you can go to a concrete something or another and rub it in a circular pattern, and that should remove some of the glue. You can also shape it with files. Um, I wouldn't recommend burning it because it smells terrible, absolutely horrible. Um, but anything you can do to get that coating of glue off so that when you use it, it's not going to ding up your metal. Like your whole goal of using one of these mallets is so that it doesn't ding up your metal. But it can if you have that glue, because that glue is, when it dries, it's super duper duper hard and it can definitely scar up your metal. And then you have to do stuff to fix it. All right. So, anyways, so you've got your round nose pliers. You've got, if you do your loop closer to the tip, it will make a small loop. Now, you may be tempted to make it next to the end and say, well, that will make a nice dainty loop. The problem with that is that you want to make sure that you have enough clearance for your wire to easily kind of, when it locks in place, that it can pivot easily. If you have it so that it will be really tight, it's going to make it so that it's really uncomfortable to, it'll be hard, it won't move freely and you won't get the optimal benefits. So this is one of the ones where if you do want to make a bigger, more exaggerated loop, it helps. Now the other thing about having a larger loop is that it will prevent your beads from falling off. Now the problem is that if it's too big, it can lose its structural integrity. So if you have a thinner gauge wire, like a 20 gauge wire, and you do this technique, which is, this is still a pretty beefy wire for what it is. But if you do this technique with a 20 gauge wire instead of 14 gauge, you kind of have to find the sweet spot where it's not going to pull apart and then, you know, your beads are gone to the wind. All right. So I see a couple people have um, have joined us. Karen's watching and a couple other people. Welcome, welcome. Bonnie says, could you put a piece of wool or cloth over to keep it from dinging up the metal? Maybe. Now, the thing about that is if you can't see it, then it's going to become harder to gauge where to hit. So, I mean, these hammers are not super expensive. And if you're going to do a lot of wire work, I would recommend getting those. If you can't find them online, definitely email us at info@allegorygallery.com and we can hook you up with either an affiliate link or we can get it in for the store. But anyway, so you kind of have to play around and find the spot that's going to work the best. All right. So I'm just going to hold this firmly, but not too firmly. Because remember, if you squeeze too tight with these, it can ding up your metal. And I'm just going to roll this over. All right. Now it's going to be kind of stiff. And that's kind of, that's, it's good and also bad. So basically I made this little loop, right? And then I'm going to take this and cinch it like this. If you need to use 2 pliers, use 2 pliers to do this, to manipulate it. And you want to make sure that your bead is nice and that your loop is nice and round and that there isn't a great big hole in between. Now, if you end up with a great big hole, you can open it up. And what I mean by hole is if there's a gap in between the wire. And what you can do is open it up like so, just like a jump ring, and then slightly close it and then push it back into place, and that will fill in any holes. If it's not super duper flush, that's okay. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that my this wire is completely flat. We don't want any kind of bows in this right now because it will cause problems. So make sure that it's flat. One trick you can do is if you hold your pliers long ways, you can kind of get, it will come in at an angle diagonally, and that can help straighten out things. Another thing you can do if you have a bench block is you put this off the edge of it, and then you take another bench block and roll it. You can also use wire straighteners, and that will help as well. So before we get any further on this project, we're going to find a piece of wood. You're going to position this over the leg of a table or in a very sturdy surface, because otherwise this will bounce around and it actually won't do anything. Now you're going to pick a piece of wood that you don't particularly care about. If it's your grandmother's dining set, skip it. If it's got some kind of sentimental value, you got that piece of furniture when you first got married and you're going to cherish it for always, skip it. Find a 2x4, a block of wood, something that you, if it gets marred up, dinged up, it's not going to be the end of the world and you're not going to be sorry. Because sometimes, you know, something slips or something happens and then all of a sudden there's a great big gouge in it and then you have to do wood filler and sand it and refinish and all this other stuff. So skip yourself this trouble and the hassle and just do this. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm going to work hard in this loop for sure. And then I want to work hard in about 1.5 inches of this. I do not want to go all the way to the end. One of the reasons why I don't want to go to the end is if I go to the end, I'm making this really stiff. And when I go to bend that loop around again, it's going to give me a headache. And in some cases, I probably won't be able to bend it. So I'm going to skip the last inch or so of this wire so that I can actually manipulate it. But it's super important that I work hard in this because as it goes into motion, um, the torque of these different wires kind of spinning and rotating and all that can cause it to come apart. So if you don't do it, it can come apart. I'm gonna take all of this stuff off of my board so it doesn't rattle around. Now, if you're worried about hitting your fingers, you can always take some painter's tape and tape it down, and that will help keep your fingers out of the way. All right. And you should not be able to bend it. So if you can bend it still, it means it's not fully work hardened. Now, if you get to the point where you want to work harden that on the edge, you'll want to capture the very kind of edge of this mallet and put this on the edge of your board and focus it like that. If you go too much in the center, you're risking work hardening this end. And if you work harden it, it means you have to anneal it. So it's another step in the process. Now, one thing you can do is you can make a bunch of these and do all the loops if you're going to make a really long chain, and then connect them all at the end. However, I like to do it like this, where I start off with the first one and then add to it. All right, so I've got this bead, this ceramic bead, and I'm going to put this on here. And then I'm going to try to make a loop that's parallel with this loop. I don't want it to be perpendicular, which means if it's like this, I don't want it to be going like this, because it will naturally want to make a twist in the wire to twist. It's going to naturally want to twist like that if you do that, or you make the loops parallel to one another. They have to be on the same plane, otherwise they're going to want to twist, and that's where you end up with headaches where your piece comes apart. It's little things like that. You don't necessarily think about them. They're little engineering things where, there's a slight twerk. There's a slight little thing in there, and if you don't correct it, it's going to cause your piece to twist. And that's where when you have those loops like this, if you twist it like this, it can come apart. All right. The thing that I love about this kind of project is that it's so forgiving. So if you don't get everything lined up, it's okay. You can always just do a couple tweaks to it and make it work. So I've got my round nose pliers again. I've got this down towards the bottom, and I'm just gonna roll this over and make a steady loop until it touches. And then I'm gonna take this and bend it so that the loop comes and it fits a little bit nicer. So that way it's not like a little saggy loop. It kind of straightens that out. Does that make sense? All right, so there's a gap in this one. So I'm going to open this up like a jump ring, squeeze it slightly. Make sure don't get your fingers in there. And then when you go to close it up, it could overlap a little bit and it will kind of snap into place. All right. And then this is a good time to have two different pliers so that you can make sure that they're on the same plane. All right. And then I'm going to work hard in that. Now, when you're holding your hammer, you want to hold it so that you're not got your finger up like this. I see this all the time, and it's so bad for your joints. What happens is all that energy that happens, all this blow force, it travels up through the head, into the hammer, and then through your finger and into this joint. So hold it down here. Hold this off to the side so you don't actually pinch your fingers, and work hard now. Now, the reason why I'm doing this on wood instead of on a steel bench block is because if I use steel, what's going to happen is it's going to flatten and compress the wire. And two things will happen that are less than good. And those things are, for one, if your bead just barely fits over this while it's that gauge, if you hammer this, it will spread out, and that will cause it not to be able to move. So if you wanted to, you could flare this out and flatten this loop out. And if you wanted to do that, go ahead, because your bead's not going to go over that. But if you do that here in this bar part, it's not going to want to move. And the kind of fun part about this design is that it's kinetic, so it moves. It's like a fidget spinner. All right. So I've got that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the piece of wire that I also cut off. And I'm going to roll over the edge and do that. Now, if I run into anything where there are any burrs or there's any sharp spots on the ends of my wire, it just takes 2 seconds to zip, zip with a file, and you take down any sharp points. This is actually, because I use that double flush cutter, it's actually pretty smooth already. So do not worry about that too much, but you just don't want that to, get caught on anything. Now, the other nice thing about this is if you don't want to have all of the links be the same length, you don't have to. I will say give yourself plenty of room to make your loops, because I've seen where people have tried to make them too short, like a rosary, and then sometimes there's not enough wire on the other end to make a nice beautiful loop and be able to manipulate it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to roll this over until it touches on this end. Makes a little P shape. And then I'm going to come back over here and kind of cinch it so that it looks more like a loop, like a lollipop, than a P shape. All right, so there's a great big hole here, gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. I'm going to hold one side stationary and then bend this into it. And then what I'm going to do is hook this into the other one, into the previous link. And then I'm going to close it up. Now, because I'm working with a heavier gauge wire, it's going to work harden a lot quicker than if it's going to be a lot easier to do this, because sometimes it will be more difficult. I don't know. What I'm saying is that this wire is thicker, so it's harder to manipulate, so it's easier to do this. Sometimes if you have a little bit of a thinner wire and you try to do this, you have to really work hard in the wire so it doesn't lose its shape. And then to work hard in this, you do have to be careful, because you don't want to bash up this wire, but at the same time, you want to still work hard in it, but you don't want to bash the loop from the previous step. All right. And then I'm going to string up another one of these. And then I'm going to do this again, parallel to the previous one. And if you want to overextend it and go a little bit further, if you can do it, you can. That also helps when you go to make that more lollipop shaped. And what I would do is I would work harden it before I add anything like another loop. All right. Now, if you want, you can make all of these loops, these bars, these looped bars, and then connect everything with a jump ring if you want. So it'll give it a slightly different look, and that's fine too. Now, one thing I will caution you is don't mess around too much with bending this while the bead is on here, because you can chip it and that glaze can go in your eye. Or if you're using glass or crystal or whatever, if you start flexing this, it will flex around that hole and it can shoot into your face. So just be careful about that, because you don't want to, go blind for that. So if you want to wear safety glasses, wear safety glasses. And then so you just repeat that. And I think this is really fun. This is also really good for like rain chains and things like that. If you're going to make rain chains, you just use cup shaped kind of components instead of beads. And you can add beads too. All right, so I've got this one. I'm going to do it one more time so you can kind of see. I'm going to roll this over a little bit extra. And then I'm going to swoop this up and have it be a little loop. All right, and then open this up, slip it on, and then close it. And the wires don't have to necessarily meet up. They just have to be close enough so that this wire can't slip out, if that makes sense. Now, if you're going to do this with, you can also solder these joints if you want, but that's another kind of thing. If you do decide to do that, you can kind of create these barriers where you can insert this into like a potato, and that will act as a heat sink so that it doesn't have your bead crack. Because sometimes there can be a thing called thermal shock, or you can heat it up and it will pop. So you can put it in like an apple, or you can put, they make this clay now that helps insulate things. I believe it's called wolf clay. And then you can solder those joints. If you do decide to do that route, I would say do all of the soldering on these loops and then put the bead, and then only worry about having to insulate it for that one thing. So that's a possibility. Now, the other thing about this is that another design option, if you do decide to solder it and you make a small enough link, is you can insert the wire in here and then use your torch, if you have a very small, very hot torch tip, and ball that wire up, and then it will catch in that loop and it won't go past that. And that's a pretty cool link if you want. All right, so I'm gonna go in here and work hard in these loops and this wire. And this one, if you don't like that rattling sound, because I don't particularly like it, you can always take a C-clamp and bolt that down, and then make sure to do it over the leg of your table, and that will help. Either that or brace it on like an anvil or something like that, so that you don't get all that reverberation. And if you do end up doing a lot of hammering and there is a lot of reverberation, do yourself a favor and get earplugs or some headphones, noise canceling headphones, because that can ruin your hearing over time. So just keep that in mind, because you don't want to go deaf. I already have hearing loss, so I don't want to like add to it. All right. So here we go. We've got the last one. And you just keep going until you're done, really. And remember, if you do decide to use one of those wires as a template and you want all of the wires to be the same exact length, then save that first wire so that when you go to cut them, it's not going to be, they're going to all be the same length if you want them to all be the same length. Now, like I said, sometimes it's cool if you have a short one, a long one. It's pretty neat. All right, so I'm just gonna work hard in that. You can also work hard on it with the pliers, by manipulating it. Like that. But the thing about that is that you can mar up your wire if you use your pliers to work harden it. And so I don't want to do that. You can see it's leaving indentations here. All right, so here is, and if I have anything like there's a little bit of a gap here, if I get concerned about that, I can kind of open that up and manipulate it so this comes through and then pull out like that. All right. And this is a really fun kind of chain. If you wanted to do more than one bead, you can do more than one bead. I like that kind of look of where it's kind of floating, and depending on how it bends, you can kind of see that kind of floating. You can mix it with other chain as well. So if you don't like this all to be like this, you can make links of that. And then mix it with, say, this is a paperclip chain. And you could mix it with this. And if you wanted to do this on a smaller scale, you could do this on a smaller scale. So that's up to you. I'm going to try to do it with a smaller scale. I'm going to use 18 gauge wire. And we'll see. So I'm going to clip the end of this off because I know that it has a little bit of a bevel on it. I'm going to do a slightly shorter link. And I'm going to take this and fold it over. And this is a way easier to work with, but like I said, it can be a little bit where it won't have the same structural integrity as a thicker wire like that. Now, the other thing about this is use a bead that's going to it's going to fit onto your wire. So, and have it not have too much of a clearance because you don't want it to have a great big hunk and have it be too separated where it can kind of like rattle around. So I've got this bead that I got from the Global Adventures Turkey Kit, and I'm going to just use that since I've got that. And I'm going to roll this over, slightly overextend it. And then I'm going to cinch that up like that. And this is super easy, basic technique, but I think it looks cool. It has a very dramatic look for being something that is really simple. Now make sure you don't hit your bead because that can be disastrous. And then also that you don't put your bead up onto the board while you're hitting it. Because if you put your bead up on the board while you're hitting it, it's going to have a gap. And so it's going to swoop down when you hit it. So have that just off the edge. And then make sure that as you're work hardening it, that it all stays on the same kind of plane. Now this can move, but you don't want your loops to be moving all over the place, because if your loops move around, then you're going to have twisting problems and some other stuff can go wrong too, where if you pull real hard, then this can come undone, and then it's not too bad. Usually that loop, even if you pull super hard, will still stay kind of in a more kind of spread out way. So your beads won't necessarily go everywhere, because you won't get that like if you pull it, it's not going to be perfectly straight. Which you need you need your wire to be completely straight for your beads to fit over that wire. Because if there's a kink in your wire, your bead is not going to slip over, especially if the gauge of the hole is similar to the gauge of the wire. All right, so there's that. And if you want, you can attach this. If you have a smaller link like this and you're worried about it coming loose here, you can use a jump ring and attach that, and you can really mix and match that, and it can be a lot of fun. But I think this is the fun thing. You can also play with it. I've seen people make kind of wavy discs and put those in there, and it kind of gives it a little bit of playfulness. You can do multiple links. The problem with doing multiple links, you just have to remember that if there's two here, that if this bows out, then it's going to cause the other one to bow out too. So just keep that in mind. So if you do that, it kind of has to be slimmer than the profile of these loops. Does that make sense? Otherwise, the beads aren't going to move smoothly. They're going to knock against each other, kind of like an abacus. All right. Okay. So that was an easy project today. I wanted to make sure that it was foolproof for me and that I wasn't going to lead you down the path of danger. But yeah, so you can do that with thinner gauge wire. This is 18 gauge wire, but I think it has a real visual presence when you do it on a heavier gauge like this. And maybe I'll finish this up off camera, but you get the point. And then if you watch Jen's tutorial, this past tutorial, Saturday morning tutorial on YouTube, you can see how she made some closures like so, and incorporate that into your design so that you can make your own closures as well. So if you need to make jump rings, she shows you how to use those stepped bail making pliers and how to make jump rings one at a time. And you can use those to figure out your closure on this as well. All right. Also, if you could do me a favor, if you like and share those tutorials by Jen on YouTube, that would be super great. Not just for us, Allegory Gallery, but also for Jen and her company, JNT Creations. It helps spread the word, and the rising tide raises all boats. So it's a win-win for everybody. Hopefully some of your friends will get interested, and who knows, maybe they'll start taking it up as well. And then you can do it together. That's always fun. Somebody said that they got together with one of their buddies and they turned on some of the tutorials and were making things. They actually, when we used to do presentations for another group, people would get their bead societies together and they would watch all together and make stuff, have a good time, and make things. So I think that's a really wonderful community building experience. If you are into that, some people don't like that. Some people, that's like their worst fear, is like to have to do things with other people. But anyways, so yeah. Let me flip this around. So that was really fast. And that's really close. So did y'all like that? If you want, I can take you around the studio and show you what I've been working on. Because we've only been hanging out for like an hour. And that seems like so fast. Sometimes these last for like 3 hours. And this is also a good thing if you're going to do like, if you're going to make little wire people. This is a good joinery kind of thing for like limbs. So if you have any arms or legs that you need to do, these are pretty cool. It's a pretty cool way to do that so that there's a joint in your pieces. So that's another way that you can take this basic skill or this basic technique and make it your own. So that, yeah. Do y'all want to go around? I'll show you if you want to see. But if nobody wants to go around, I'm not going to do it. I don't see anybody saying that they want to see. So we'll, I don't know. Do you want me to take you around my studio and show you what I've been working on? All right, Bonnie says do it. Karen says yes, please. All right, you're gonna see a mess. There's no way around that. So you're just gonna have to deal with it. All right, and then I'll flip this around and you can kind of see the magic, behind the scenes magic of what everything looks like. So if you ever were curious about what it looked like behind the scenes, here are the lights. All the lights. They're actually pretty warm today. And then this is the bead room. It looks like a nightmare. I'm not going to focus on that. And then so here's fulfillment. A bunch of people's orders ready to go. And so this is my kind of metal area. And so during the workshop with Stephen Yusko, I made these texture sheets. These are steel. And so you heat this up until it's almost yellow, which is just before you burn up your metal. Because you can burn it up and it gets all kind of crusty and it can start sparking. And then that's not good. You want it to not do that. You don't want to burn your metal up. So you get it yellow hot, so super hot, so you have more time to work. And then you take it under the power hammer and you take something and it's like on a bar or something, and you hold it down. This is not how you do it because this is too close. And then the power hammer strikes it, and then you move it and it strikes it and you move it. And you control it with your foot while you're doing this, and it creates this texture. All right. So I did this. This is this one. To get that shape, I don't have the shapes here. They're at the house. But this was that kind of curly Q. And then there's 2 bars of rebar that were welded together and put on the end of a stick or a metal bar. And then that was what was pushed into it. And it's kind of cool. It gives it a feathered look. And then I annealed some copper sheet. And then first I tried using the hydraulic press on these. And it didn't work very well. It kind of worked, but the problem is that it wasn't deep enough. So I ended up taping these onto the backs of the texture sheets and then hammering it with a hammer And then when I was happy with the amount of texture, then I took it over to the sawing station over here, my jeweler's bench, and I took my outline and I glued it using rubber cement onto the back, and then used my jeweler saw to cut out the silhouettes because I'm doing this whole series of self portraits. That's why I look like from the side, except I don't generally have this thing sticking out the back, but that's where the kind of the picture got cut off. And so all of my self portraits have this weird kind of dowager's hump, very angular. And one thing you'll notice is that I'm not touching the fronts of these. And the reason why is I'm planning to enamel them and I clean them up. So I don't want to have a bunch of oil and residue from my hands transfer to the surface because otherwise it won't stick. All right. And then William, he helped me out and he did the counter enamel on the back. And you'll notice that these are slightly bowed. And in theory, I could flatten this out as I go, and any of the cracks will heal itself in the heat. But I haven't added the enamel on top. And when I add the enamel on top, it should flatten things out. And I'm going to try some different techniques. I've got some different ideas about how to make that pattern really kind of show up. So we'll see if it works or not. And then after I do that and they're enameled, then I'll do like a prong setting or a tab setting and put that into a finished piece. And then the other project that I'm working on, which if you go over to my Instagram, you could kind of see the process that I did with those ones. But this one I haven't shown yet. And so this is a sheet of copper that I took fine silver and I fused it to the surface of the copper. And I did a process called reticulation, which kind of creates those wrinkles. And then I'm stamping it. And I'm not going to tell you what I'm stamping. You know, you can probably see it if it focuses at all. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do enamel on top of this, and it's going to become what's called a boss tie. And a boss tie is where you have a textured metal surface, either that you engraved or you've etched or you've stamped or whatever. And then wherever you put the enamel, if you do a transparent enamel, it goes into those recesses, and wherever it goes into those recesses, it makes a slightly darker color, and then it will, what am I saying? Wherever the metal is higher, there'll be thinner amounts of the glass, of the enamel. And then so wherever it's deeper, it will be darker and that impression will kind of show up. And then, yeah, so I do have to, and one of the reasons why I'm doing it like this, the traditional way of doing kind of adding that silver is you take your copper piece and you put a layer of flux, which is basically clear. It's always funny how there are things that have the same name, but they're not the same thing. But you take a layer and you put a layer of clear enamel and you put that down. And then you take fine sheets of metal leaf and then you embed that in the surface and then you do a layer on top of that. Now, the thing about that is you won't necessarily be able to texture it like that. So there are some people who do like foil and then they texture the foil. But I haven't really seen anybody do it. So I don't know about that. And also, I want to keep this relatively light because it is a thicker piece. So I don't want this to be super heavy when I add. If you add another layer on the front, you have to add another layer on the back. And I don't want it to get super, super duper heavy. So that's why I did this kind of bimetal, where the two metals are kind of fused on top of one another. Now, the other reason why that I'm doing it like this is because this is relatively thick. And I don't want to spend all that money on fine silver. So that's why I'm doing it like this. So that I can, for one, save money, and so two, keep the weight down, and number three, it's a cool process, and we'll see if it works out. I don't know. I can't guarantee if it will work or not. I kind of purposely left some and burnt some of the copper, or burnt some of the fine silver so that the copper could show through, and that way there'll be more kind of patterns and stuff, and it will kind of have an interesting kind of look, as opposed to just being completely all one. I want it to have that kind of variegation in it. So I should probably be able to finish those up tonight while William is at his class. And so I'm excited to see. All right, I'm going to end the video without having to flip it around. Well, maybe I'll do it. You'll see my messy studio. That's the real truth of this, y'all. Some people have very pristine studios. I do not. One day I would like to have a very pristine studio, but today's not that day. I'm going to truth tell. But that's where, if you look behind me, that kiln, I'm going to get the ventilation thing, and it's going to sit like a cap on top of that, and it has a motor on top, and then we're going to vent it, and I'm going to do like a split to the outside. And the reason why I'm going to do that instead of having multiple holes is I don't want to put too many holes in the wall. So I just want one hole in the wall and an exhaust on the outside, kind of like how you have a house, like when you have the stove exhaust that goes outside. I'm going to put that on the outside, and there's going to be one hole, but there's going to be two sections. So the thing that's on the top of the kiln, however, you can tell that I'm super coordinated, y'all. But the thing that goes on top of the kiln is going to suck up the fumes from that. And then over behind me where my soldering station is right now, I've got a hood that used to be a kitchen hood, and it's great big. And I'm also going to insulate a little box, and I'm going to insulate it with concrete board, and that way it's going to be non-flammable. Now, the other nice thing about that is sometimes when you have open air like this, some of that heat is lost in the process. And so when you have heat loss, if you're going to do stuff where you're going to be doing a lot of multiple heatings and stuff, generally speaking, you take those little kiln bricks and you make like a little hut, and that will help keep the heat in. But this will also prevent anything from like air, like a breeze coming through, like blowing stuff out. It's just another precaution that we're going to do to keep our station safe. And it's also going to channel and funnel the air when we put another motor onto that. So it's going to suck the air up, but it's going to suck the fumes of the soldering as opposed to just like the ambient air around it. You know what I'm talking about? So it's not going to be like getting stuff from up here. It's going to be stuff that's more specifically like directly on it. All right. So that's our plan. Not necessarily this week, but soon. I'm going to definitely go out to New Jersey this weekend on Saturday, which I'm kind of dreading because it's a Memorial Day weekend and I can just anticipate the traffic being crazy. But I'm going to be around Philadelphia. So if you're in the Philly area and you want to get out meet up for a late lunch, early dinner kind of thing, let me know and maybe we can meet up. Because I'm going to be there on Saturday, and then after I pick it up and maybe meet up with somebody for lunch or whatever, then I'm going to head straight back. So it's going to be a long day, but it shouldn't be too bad. All right. So have a great rest of your evening. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't really know what I'm going to do tomorrow, as with most days. So if you have any suggestions on things that you would like to see, let us know and I'll try to do it. Some things I know how to do, some things I don't know how to do. Maybe I'll give you a progress report on this project and the other projects, but we'll see what I actually get done. All right. Well, I will talk to you all later. See ya.